Mm. Well, I said last video about Saint Thomas's last words. Remember that I'm reading from William of Tocqueville. This document is there in our group, right? This is the oldest biography of Thomas Aquinas by, of course, William of Tocqueville, and it's a pretty nice biography. This is chapter 58, and it's called On the Miraculous Passages of Our Doctor's, Presages of Our Doctor's Death. Mm. Then, as Thomas was about to receive the sacrament, he said, I receive thee, who art the price of my soul's redemption. I receive thee, who art the viaticum of my pilgrimage. For love of thee, I have labored, studied, and kept the vigil. Thee have I preached, thee have I taught, nor have I consciously said anything against thee. Yet, if I have said anything amiss, it was through ignorance that I spoke, nor was I obdurate in my own sense. If I had said, if I have said anything ill about this sacrament or any other matter of faith, I submit all that I have written to the correction of the Holy Roman Church, in obedience to which I now pass from this life. Right. So, of course, if we think about Thomas Aquinas, and if modern thinkers will discover Thomas Aquinas as this very logical thinker, the next step, logically, is to say that he was not exactly a Catholic, right? Because he was just kind of, well, if you want to be a scholar at that time, you had to be a Catholic, right? And then, of course, we have this passage, but of course, they could just answer, look, this passage was written by a guy hired by the Pope, right? And it was. But then, of course, we can just present a lot of passages of works by Thomas Aquinas, hundreds and hundreds of pages, where he would prove this point: the authority of the Church, the authority of revelation, the how can I say, the supremacy of revelation in relation to philosophy, all of that, it wasn't, and more to the point, even if we can prove that he believed all of that, a critic would say, yeah, but some some philosophers believe in ghost. But the point is, that was part of his philosophy, right? So we cannot ignore that, right? Well, I skipped some paragraphs there, again, just with this idea um, of advancing. And I believe what I want to read, let me just see. Uh, Yeah, this one here. In short, most people, Christian or heathen like a pagan, right, would now agree that the Franciscan sentiment was primarily a Christian sentiment, unfolded from within, out of an innocent, or if you will, ignorant faith in the Christian religion itself. Nobody, as I have said, says that Saint Francis drew his primary inspiration from Ovid. That, of course, it's a famous Roman poet, right? It would be every bit as false to say that Aquinas drew his primary inspiration from Aristotle. So that is the point People who accept Thomas Aquinas without understanding deeply Thomas Aquinas will fall. That Thomas Aquinas is a disciple of Aristotle, right? The whole lesson of his life, especially his early life, the whole story of his childhood and choice of a career shows that he was supremely and directly devotional, and that he passionately loved the Catholic worship long before he found he had to fight for it. But there is also a special and clinching instance of this, which once more connects Saint Thomas with Saint Francis. It seems to be strangely forgotten that both these saints were in actual fact imitating a master who was not Aristotle, let alone Ovid, when they sanctified the senses of the simple things of nature, when St. Francis walked humbly among the beasts, or St. Thomas debated courteously among the Gentiles. Those who miss this, the point that they were imitating somebody, right? They were Christian, miss the point of the religion, even if it be a superstition. Even if you are criticizing religion, you will miss the point if you forget that for the religious person, well, his life is imitating and following his God, right? Nine, they miss the very point they would call most superstitious. Right? And then there is this continuation here. Let me see if I will need context. These saints were, in the most exact sense of the term, humanists. These saints were, in the most exact sense of the term, humanist. Remember, humanist is not something we would usually apply to a saint, because if you're a humanist, it means that human is in the center, right? And the beauty comes from humans. But remember, Chesterton loves to play with words, right? So these saints were, in the most exact sense of the term, humanists, because they were insisting on the immense importance of the human being in the theological scheme of the things. But they were not humanists marching along a path of progress that leads to modernism and general skepticism. Because remember, once you believe the man is the center and beauty comes from man and truth is decided by man, you get, for example, modernism in general, but modernist art, right? That is going to just abandon this idea of beauty. This is interesting. You start by saying beauty is in human, right? In the man. And you start by saying that truth is in the man, and you end up saying that there is no truth and there's no beauty. And I'm not making a case for it. I'm not giving arguments here. I'm just stating something that is historically accurate, right? Modern man believes that words like beauty, honor, truth should be avoided because they are naive. So, in other words, modern man doesn't believe in beauty. So, see, so first there was this beauty outside man, right? And men should try to reach beauty and then justice and strength, right? After that, there is this general beauty for all humankind, but the man is the base. After that, well, if it's in a man, there are different men, right? One man is completely different from the other. Therefore, there are a lot of truths, a lot of beauties, a lot of different conceptions, conflicting conceptions. And then you take a step further and you think, well, if there are so many of them, so it's all relative. So it's not about beauty. It's not that beauty exists. What does exist is taste, right? So for you, beauty is, I don't know, a smashed banana. For me, beauty is, I don't know, some stones, you know. Uh, and then, of course, see, so we get through that process. The same thing with the truth, right? So, first, the truth is something we should be in direction of. Then, truth is in all men. We are the base of the truth. Then, there are several truths. Then, there are individual truths. Then, each one, because each one has their truth, it's not a truth, it's still perspectives, right? And perspectives, of course, modern men understand perspective as a little world. So remember Mephistopheles again. It's something that has long been done to fashion little worlds within the bigger one, right? So each human, each individual becomes a little world with his own truth, his own concept of beauty, his own concept of right and wrong, all right? And just those things exist just subjectively, right? So humanists marching along a path of progress that leads to modernism and general skepticism. It makes all the sense now, right? For in their very humanism, they were affirming a dogma now often regarded as the most superstition, superhumanism. They were strengthening that staggering doctrine of incarnation. Uh, for in their very humanist, they were affirming a dogma now regarding the most superstition superhumanist. We're going back and talking about Thomas Aquinas and Saint Francis, right? They were strengthening that staggering doctrine of incarnation, which the skeptics find it hardest to believe. There cannot be a stiffer piece of Christian divinity than the divinity of Christ. Well, for the next class, let's maybe continue from this point on, right? I advise you, I don't know how you are planning your readings, right? But I wouldn't advise you to go too much further than this. I would strongly advise you to go back and read those, let's say, 17 pages, and not advance so much. And of course, if you have the time, I would advise you to read the biography of Thomas Aquinas by William of Tocqueville. Okay, thank you very much.